Welcome to another class. We're gonna have a great time today. We have a good group in the Zoom class. Glad Mary's feeling better. Not sure who iPhone is. I think it might be Karen Mitchell, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, it's good to see everybody in the group. Just Karen, I want to let you know we're all still praying for you during your time of loss of your mother. And may your memory continue to be blessed, and may Hashem give you strength to manage the household and your brother who is not doing well. So just want you to know that we're all remembering that in our prayers. In this Parshat today, we're going to be dealing with Parshat Shemot. And before I get started, I'd like to remind those who are watching on YouTube to make sure, take time to subscribe. I really appreciate your subscription to the YouTube channel. It's absolutely free, doesn't cost you anything. And it also helps our community to grow and helps the videos that we have get shown to a larger audience. So thank you so much, and I appreciate that. Also, Sandy just started a podcast, a short one, and it's Parsha Moment Podcast, and it's really nice. She's got a very comforting Texas Southern style voice that soothes your soul. And her and Nancy are also working on a project, I think, right, for the future. And we'll see how that goes. So she's doing quite well. And you guys make me just so happy and pleased to see people in the community stepping up and doing more to bring Torah to the nations. It's so exciting. Today we're dealing with Parshat Shemot, and quickly I'm going to do an overview to teach a short message about what this whole text brings to the nations, and then we'll get into the details of the discussion. I would like to talk about how challenges forges strengths, the strength of an individual, your leadership, and faith. Exodus 1 through 60 or 6:1 illustrates how difficulties and challenges play really a crucial role in shaping individuals' abilities to succeed. We'll deal with several examples, actually 4 detailed examples. But often when we're younger, we think that struggle and difficulties are there to knock us down and destroy us. And thank God, as you get older, you realize they were the most important element of your growth and development in life. Some of the greatest lessons we learn is through the strongest or most difficult struggles. And I hope to encourage someone that will watch this video today and realize whatever difficulty you're going through, it's just a temporary moment. You know, we've used this phrase, this too will pass. And it's very true. If we just hold on and develop the lessons out of it and grow from it, great things will begin to happen. The first thing that I would like to point out is that the growth of the Israelite people grew through oppression. Now, if I were God, I would not have selected oppression and difficulty for the greatest people to preserve Torah, but that's why I am not the Holy One, blessed be He. I would have probably given them a life of ease, and I would have probably suffered from that, seeing that the people did not get the growth that they needed. The textual reference that I am focusing on for this section is Exodus 1:12. It says, "But the more they were oppressed, the more they increased and spread out, so that they came to dread the Israelites." The Egyptians were just absolutely shocked, at least the leadership, as to the growth of the Jewish people in the land. And we understand, we read in the text, and we'll read in a moment, how they would have children, and the women didn't die in childbirth, and they would have multiple children. One interpretation of the text says that they had 6 children at a time. Now, I don't know if that is figuratively or literally, but they were abundant and had plenty of children. And to this day, Orthodox communities all around the world have multiple numbers of children. You go walking around the streets of a Jewish community, you go into Israel, into the Haredi community, and you see these families walking with 7, 8, 9 children following them, and mom pushing a baby in a carrier. Now, the interpretation of this verse, literally, the Israelites suffered under Egyptian slavery, and this forged a resilience and a unity and their ability to thrive despite oppression, and demonstrated a real collective strength that would sustain them in their journey toward freedom. Now, one would say, well, if they were so unified, why did they have such disunity in the desert? Well, because they still needed to work out some issues. So remember the words of Hashem to Moshe, and Moshe to the people, that says, how long will you continue to circle around this portion of the desert? How long are you going to keep repeating this? So one of the lessons that we learn is that if we don't learn the lesson, to achieve our ultimate success and our goals in life, we have to begin to learn from the lesson and make improvements on ourselves. Our life is about making improvements. So the lesson in this is adversity often forces us as individuals or in a group to discover an inner strength, a solidarity, preparing for the future and for challenges. Every people group around the world have had to go through these particularly difficult challenges, and you hope that it doesn't bring them to ultimate destruction like many great kingdoms, the Greeks, the Romans, go on and on. Even in this country, if we don't learn through our hardship, we'll never achieve to a higher level. And Baruch Hashem, hopefully, in our day, the nations will have begun to learn their lessons in the struggle, and we will find ourselves edging even closer to a redemption that Rabbi Zvi often talks about, that the ultimate thing that we should be looking for is the redemption of the nations, the redemption of the world. Number two, Moses' journey through his hardship. So we talked about the collective group of the Jewish people in Egypt. Now Moses. Moses is born during a time of great danger when Pharaoh decrees that all of the Hebrew boys were to be killed. As a matter of fact, there are some saying that he may have decreed some of the Egyptian firstborn to be killed because of this. I don't know, but for sure, the Hebrew boys, Exodus 1:22 through chapter 2, verse 2. Moses is placed in a basket and set adrift in the Nile, basically an act of both desperation and hope for his mother and sister and family, that this person who the Egyptians knew through their conjuring that there was going to be a great leader that comes up in Egypt, and they were concerned that this great leader would come up and cause so much problems that they needed to destroy all of the male children. Now, he was shaped by this hardship. Moses' survival and upbringing in Pharaoh's palace, which in verse 2 of chapter 10 gave him a very unique perspective, and both as an insider, I guess, to power and authority, and as an outsider with the connection of his people. I can only imagine the great struggle that he endured, seeing his people go under such hardship, and he was living in the palace of a king, a ruler, having the niceties of royalty, and to see his people suffering. Now, after killing an Egyptian taskmaster, Moses flees to Egypt to avoid execution, Exodus 2:15. This gave him a unique perspective, both as this insider to power and the outsider with the connection of people, because all of a sudden he realized he's being ripped from his life of luxury into a life of being an exile, a difficult thing. In Midian, he became a shepherd. He was with Yitro, a period of real personal growth in preparation to his leadership. He worked hard for his father-in-law. He gained a beautiful wife. He had children. And Moses' difficulties, really, the alienation and fear and disappointment began to shape his humility, his empathy, and sense of justice, essential trials for the role of a leader. And all of us realize that our personal leadership style, our personal midot, our character traits are actually formed. Our empathy and humility and sense of justice is formed out of our own alienation and fear and even injustice. Some people that I've known very closely have experienced the highest level of injustice in their life and struggle, whether by abuse, physical or sexual abuse, growing up as a child. And those individuals tend to become very empathetic and full of sympathy toward other people, and absolutely are torn up with injustice when it comes to seeing the struggles of other people. These people become very benevolent people in life. Number three, let's look at God's revelation amidst the suffering. We have to remember that whenever we're going through the trials, whether collectively or individually, there are signs and revelations in this suffering. I remember Rabbi Dror Kasudo often mentioned in his lectures to look for God in the cracks. Do you remember this phrase? Look for him in the fissures. And when he first said that, I'm like, what in the world is he talking about in the cracks? And whenever you're going through the most difficult time of suffering, it almost seems that God has vacated you during that time. You feel like that you are alone. I want to remind you of the words that God spoke to Moshe when he said to come to Pharaoh. You remember that phrase? Come to Pharaoh. And we see that in several other places within the Torah where God speaks and says, come. What does that mean? Well, we understand that wherever God calls you to, or whatever you're going through, you are heading in the direction of the Holy One, blessed be He. You're not leaving his presence. God's presence never leaves you. His divine presence is at all places at all time. So whatever you're going through, understand that there is an understanding or a revelation or comprehension that passes our own human cognitive processes. And finally, we will discover that it has led us to the throne of Hashem. Now, the Israelites suffering and their cries for deliverance are what really actually led to God's intervention. They cried out to Hashem. So another sub point under the front part of the collective suffering and the individual suffering is when you cry out to Hashem and you weep in tears before Hashem, asking for rescue, asking for understanding in your struggles. Know that God will intervene. He will come to your aid and to your rescue. Don't feel that you've been abandoned by any means. And it is this intervention that God came to Moses. This highlights how desperation can lead to the transformation of an individual, then combined with that faith of the person and that person's action. You remember Hannah? Hannah went before God in prayer, and she would go, and the priest thought that she was intoxicated. She just acted so almost out of her mind in her grief that she couldn't bear a child. God heard that wonderful prayer of a mother. I think today of my father and mother of blessed memory. And I realize today that my mother and father's prayer for my success and closeness to God is still being answered to this day. To this day, my mother's prayers are still being answered. And thank God that our prayers have a systemic, long-term, eternal effect, not only in your own life, but in your children's life and your great-grandchildren's life. we need to know that your prayers of desperation are going to be heard. What is the lesson we learn about this? Struggles often bring clarity of purpose and divine support, helping us as individuals and as communities to rise to our potential. Wherever you are watching this video, understand that if you want to achieve the highest level of success in your struggle, know that crying out to God and clinging to Hashem, clinging to the Holy One, ultimately will bring you the what's the word? The revival of your soul. Will bring a revival of your situation. Last, I would like to mention Moses' reluctance, it appears, and growth as a leader. Now, some would say Moses was very reluctant. In this text in Exodus, the 3rd chapter, verse 11, it says, Moses said to God, "Well, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and free the Israelites from Egypt? Who am I?" Now, one could interpret this as Moses' hesitation and feeling inadequate. Maybe he was still smarting from being an exile or a fugitive of justice. Maybe he felt like that if I go back, I will be murdered or killed. Maybe this self doubt was a part of the growth that took place in Midian. With God's encouragement, Moses gains confidence and learns to lead despite of his perceived limitations. I'm not sure that it was his limitations. Let me explain to you why, or his perceived limitations. Often being humbled by your circumstance causes you to have extreme humility. I don't know, often humility can be interpreted as a weakness. Humility can often be interpreted by other people as someone who may be quite indecisive about their abilities to do something. But I really do believe, and Moses demonstrated this at the highest level throughout the journey with the Israelite people until the day he crawled up to the mountain and went up to the mountain and laid with his fathers. He exercised the highest level of humbleness and humility before the people of God. Even though he had his own struggles during that time, he continued to walk in great humility before God. So facing his difficulties included this internal struggle. When we face the difficulties of our life and we combine it with our internal struggles and combine it with what God says about you and what God says about humanity, and for the Jewish people, what God says to the Jewish people, you can push individuals to grow beyond their perspective limits. Israel right now is the finest example. They have just gone through over a year and a half or so of horrendous struggle. When October 7th happened, all of us had hearts that were broken, and sadness filled not only the Israel and the Jewish people, but the people of the nations who were righteous. And we all struggled and supported them in every way we could. Some gave money, some donated, some even volunteered from other countries to go into Israel and to work, to help supply aid, to work within the military, to do jobs, to relieve soldiers to be able to do their duty. In essence, not only was the Jewish people consolidated and reduced down to what's the word for it? When you cook, you make a reduction, right? Right, and often those are considered mothers. They are considered like what do you call it? Sauces. Mother sauces is what they're called. And when you reduce vegetables and beef and whatever else you put in it, and you boil it down, you put it under the most intense heat, you get the most rich flavors. And a sauce is the reduction that comes from a chopping, a breaking, and a boiling, and a crucible of hot liquid until it becomes an extremely savory sauce. The Jewish people have become a savoring sauce to the mouth of the Holy One. And to think that this day the hostages will be released, all of the hostages will be released soon. Soon, God willing, peace will come to the Middle East. Soon, redemption will become. And it is because of facing the difficulties that the Israelites have endured and that the nations have endured. May we all, as individuals, push toward reducing ourselves to the sweetest level to merit redemption. One of the biggest things we always ask ourselves, have we merited redemption? You will have merited redemption when you have squeezed out every essence you can out of your life. So, what does this demonstrate, this Parsha Shemot? That difficulties are not just obstacles, but opportunities to grow and to transform. The Israelites' resilience under slavery, Moses' journey through fear and alienation, and eventual divine intervention all shows how adversity cultivated the strength and wisdom and faith necessary for achievement. This teaches us that enduring challenges can often be the first step toward our ultimate greatness. May Hashem guide us as we walk through our particular difficulties and achieve our highest level of success in our life. That concludes my overview of the text. Let's get into the discussion.